When I first toured Maplewood Towers, I believed I'd found the perfect solution to my housing dilemma. After years of living in cramped, poorly maintained apartments, I yearned for a building with a strong sense of order, where the hallways were clean, the neighbors polite, and the environment stable. Maplewood Towers advertised all that and more, a well-organized condominium with a robust homeowners association to keep everything neat. The building itself soared 9 stories tall, each floor featuring wide corridors with plush carpeting, potted plants in corners, and decent natural light from large windows at the ends of the hall. There was even a spacious communal lounge on the ground floor, with a reading nook and small library. The manager proudly boasted that Maplewood had the friendliest neighbors, plus the best-run HOA in the county. At the time, I considered it a selling point. After all, who wouldn't want well-kept common areas and a sense of unity? Sure, an HOA meant extra rules, but I figured that was better than chaos. I had no idea that Maplewood's pristine atmosphere was largely the doing of a single, formidable presence, Brenda Arnett, known throughout the building by the not-so-secret nickname Karen. She was in her late 40s, always impeccably dressed in crisp blouses or suits, with coiffed hair and a sharp gaze that seemed to note every detail. Though she projected an aura of polite civility, rumors called her the hallway dictator. I brushed off the cautionary tales from a couple of older residents, who whispered about Karen's stringent approach. They claimed she walked the floors daily, checking for any deviation from the building's visual standards. At the time, I saw no cause for worry. I was certain I'd get along fine with the HOA's rules. Indeed, I was excited to add a touch of greenery to my personal living space. Little did I know that my innocent plan, to keep a few potted houseplants in the hallway near my unit, would set me on a collision course with Karen's unyielding obsession for uniformity. During my first few weeks at Maplewood Towers, I marveled at the sense of order. The carpets were spotless, the elevator gleamed, and the trash chute area had never smelled. The neighbors seemed polite, if a bit reserved. Harriet, an elderly woman living 2 doors down, was the exception, a warm soul who knocked on my door offering homemade cookies. When I asked about the building's atmosphere, she gave a knowing smile. It's calm because Karen demands it be calm. She's on the HOA board, and she's thorough. Ignoring the ominous ring in Harriet's words, I embraced my new routine. My condo unit, a bright 2-bedroom on the 5th floor, faced east and welcomed the morning sun. I adored houseplants, particularly easy care varieties like snake plants, pothos, and prayer plants. The only snag, my interior windowsill space was somewhat limited, but the hallway outside my front door boasted a wide nook with direct sunlight from a large window at the corridor's end. Harriet pointed out that some neighbors occasionally placed a side table or small decor item there, using the nook as a mini lounge area. So I decided, why not keep a pair of decorative potted plants on a cute little stand near my door? They'd get extra light, liven up the otherwise bland hallway, and remain in my direct line of sight. I arranged 2 plants, a leafy pothose and a small pink polka dot plant, in tasteful ceramic pots, placed them on a narrow table, and made sure not to block the walkway. Harriet admired the look, calling it a delightful splash of color. For a while, everything seemed fine. Neighbors walking by offered compliments on the greenery. The building staff made no comments. My plants thrived, happily absorbing corridor sunlight. I even kept a small watering can in my foyer closet to give them a daily mist. Life felt content. I assumed the HOA would see it as a positive contribution, until the day Karen took notice. One afternoon, I found a neatly folded letter slipped under my door. It bore the Maplewood Towers HOA header, but I recognized the formal, clipped tone that Harriet had attributed to Brenda Arnett, Karen. It read, "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that you have placed potted plants in the hallway near your unit. Please be reminded that the common areas must remain clear of personal items to allow unobstructed passage, per Section 4.2 of the HOA guidelines. Additionally, we request all decor to conform to building standards of uniform appearance. Please remove these items promptly, or the association may issue a citation. Sincerely, MTHOA Compliance." I frowned. The letter gave no direct mention of safety hazards or true violations, just a broad statement about unobstructed passage. But my table and plants didn't block the corridor in any meaningful way. The hallway was still wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Harriet scowled at the letter, calling it typical Karen nonsense. She's always claiming, hallway must remain clear, when she just doesn't like something personally. I decided to push back politely, emailing the HOA an inquiry. I asked if there was a specific measurement I needed to maintain for egress, pointing out my table left over 4 feet of open walking space. A day later, I received a curt response from the official HOA mailbox, presumably written by Karen, stating, "Common area decor must be approved in advance. Plants are not recommended for hallway display. Please comply or face a potential fine." No actual code references, just a vague warning. Frustrated, I let Harriet know. She advised me to attend the monthly HOA meeting to argue my case. Sometimes Karen yields if you show you're not intimidated. But be careful, she can be petty. She's done this to others. They usually remove their items to avoid conflict. Undeterred, I decided I'd fight for my little greenery, confident I wasn't truly violating safety codes. Eager to settle the matter officially, I attended the next HOA board meeting in the building's community room. About a dozen residents showed up. At the front table sat 4 board members, including Ms. Delgado, a mild-mannered older woman, and, of course, Brenda Arnett. Karen, in a tailored navy suit, notepad in hand, posture radiating authority. After routine housekeeping items, maintenance budgets, elevator servicing schedules, they opened the floor for resident concerns. I raised my hand, introduced myself as the new occupant in Unit 506, and explained my desire to keep 2 small potted plants in the hallway nook. I described how they didn't obstruct the path or cause hazards, and how some neighbors found them a pleasant addition. Karen fixed me with a firm gaze. While we appreciate greenery, the hallways must remain consistent with the building's established decor. Personal items can create clutter, hamper the building's uniform appearance, and, yes, pose potential hazards during emergencies. We have a rule that no personal furniture or items are allowed in the corridors without board approval. I calmly asked if I could request approval. Ms. Delgado seemed open to discussion, but Karen cut in, referencing a strict policy to keep corridors free of personal property. "We have had issues before," she said, "and the board generally does not permit items in the hall, especially plants that require watering. There's risk of water spills or humidity issues." I tried to counter with logic. The pots are well sealed, I use minimal water, and it's no more hazardous than the building's own decorative stands. Could we trial it for a short period to see if it's truly a problem? Karen's face hardened. Our stance is firm. We must keep a uniform standard, not allow haphazard personal decor in shared spaces. If you enjoy gardening, please keep it inside your unit. Ms. Delgado hesitated, then indicated the board typically sides with the compliance officer, Karen. Another board member shrugged apologetically. The final verdict: either remove the plants from the hallway or face a $50 monthly fine. The meeting moved on to other topics, leaving me simmering with frustration. Harriet whispered her sympathy, but said, "I told you. Karen always wins in these forums." Undeterred, I left with a sense of disillusionment. So that's how it works. A single individual can crush harmless creativity under the guise of uniform standards. I considered caving, but a rebellious spark ignited within me. If I must remove them from the hall, maybe I could place them in some alternate location. That's when the idea formed: the storage room. I discovered the building's storage room by accident, soon after I moved in. Each floor had a small communal storage closet near the stairwell, meant for stashing seasonal decor or rarely used items. But on my floor, the closet was mostly empty, except for a few dusty boxes of old paint cans. I had the option of renting a small corner if I wanted extra space. Harriet said nobody used it because the building had a basement storage area that was more convenient. So that upstairs closet remained largely neglected. Suddenly, it occurred to me that if I couldn't keep my plants in the hallway, I could comply with the letter of the rule by removing them from the corridor, but I could place them just beyond that threshold, inside the storage room. Technically, it was outside the corridor. If I added a grow light or two, the plants might still survive. Sure, it wasn't as scenic, but perhaps I could keep them living there temporarily. It felt like a small defiance, abiding by the requirement to remove them from the hall, without letting Karen kill my horticultural joy. Yet as I mulled it over, my plan expanded. Why stop at just 2 houseplants? If I had a dedicated space, I could create a whole indoor greenhouse environment with shelves, lights, humidity controls. Harriet half joked. You'll turn that dingy closet into a tropical jungle. My eyes lit up at the notion. Why not? If the building's rules forbid personal items in common hallways, they said nothing about how I used my rented corner of a communal storage closet, assuming I got permission to rent it. So I approached the property manager. She was a friendly lady named Carla. For a small monthly fee, she let me formally rent half of the fifth-floor storage closet. She admitted no one else had requested it, so I was free to set up my stuff, as long as it didn't block the door or hamper anyone else's rightful space. Perfect. With that arrangement in place, I started plotting a lush transformation. I spent the next week scouring gardening forums and local stores for the items needed to convert a drab closet into a mini greenhouse. The space measured about 8 by 10 feet, bigger than I'd first realized. It had no windows, but a decent overhead light fixture. I'd have to install proper grow lights, ensuring each shelf received enough full-spectrum illumination. I also needed a small humidifier to replicate the moisture levels many tropical plants crave. I purchased 3 wire shelving units, about 6 feet tall each, to maximize vertical space. Then I selected a variety of exotic or humidity-loving plants, monsteras, calatheas, ferns, some trailing pothos, and my original corridor duo. The key was controlling temperature and humidity without creating mold or damaging the closet walls. I found an old shower curtain rod system that could hang from the ceiling, letting me drape plastic sheeting around sections to contain moisture. Then, a small fan would circulate air to prevent stagnation. It was quite an elaborate plan, but I was excited. Harriet, though she teased me, cheered me on. It's brilliantly petty, she said. Karen demanded you remove them from the hall, so you're abiding. But she never said you couldn't have a jungle next to the hall. Just watch out for electrical concerns. The HOA might fuss if they see extension cords. I assured her I'd keep cords secured and safe, ensuring no violation of building codes. The manager Carla gave me no pushback as long as I didn't cause hazards or block egress. Finally, the day arrived to set up. I transferred my plants from the hallway to that closet, hooking up a series of LED grow lights on the shelves, plugging them into a power strip with a timer. The small humidifier whirred softly in the corner. It took hours to arrange everything, but by midnight, I had a mini indoor garden. The overhead fluorescent was overshadowed by the pinkish glow of the specialized grow lights. My plants looked almost mystical in that enclosed environment. Harriet popped her head in, mouth agape. Wow, it's an actual greenhouse in here. Now that my plants were relocated from the corridor, I assumed the matter was resolved. I complied with the letter, if not the spirit, of Karen's edict. I left a small sign on the closet door reading storage in use. Please do not unplug equipment. Then I went about my daily routine, tending my tropical garden, each morning, adjusting water levels, and checking the plant's progress. To my delight, they seemed to thrive under the carefully controlled conditions. Freed from any hallway regulations, I expanded, adding a couple of rare orchids for extra flair. The closet smelled of fresh greenery and damp earth, a quiet oasis hidden away on the 5th floor. A few days later, as I fussed with the humidifier, I heard footsteps in the corridor. Then a voice. Why is this door latched from inside? That voice. Karen. My pulse quickened. She must have been wandering the floor, noticing the sign. The doorknob jiggled. I realized if I opened it calmly, I could share my creation. Let her see how I used the storage space. So I swung the door open to reveal my mini greenhouse. Karen's eyes went wide. She stared at the racks of plants, the bright glow from the LED lamps, the gentle mist swirling around the leaves. A few vines draped from a top shelf, creating a whimsical canopy. The faint hum of the humidifier filled the air. I beamed with pride. Hello, Ms. Arnett. Pardon the surprise. I'm renting part of this closet for my plants, since they're no longer in the hallway. She blinked, obviously taken aback. You turned this closet into a greenhouse. Her tone was half incredulous, half irritated. She stepped inside gingerly, her high heels tapping on the floor. Is this even allowed? I mean, we can't have a jungle in the building's storage area. I shrugged politely. I got permission to rent the space from management. I keep it tidy and ensure no water damage. No official rule forbids cultivating plants in a rented portion of the storage room. I'm careful with electrical safety. I pointed to the properly mounted surge protector. It's well within guidelines. I removed them from the hallway as requested. Karen's lips thinned. She scanned the shelves brimming with lush leaves and blossoms. But this is extremely unorthodox. The building wasn't meant for horticultural labs, she muttered. I calmly repeated that I was abiding by the building's rules. No corridor clutter, no hazards. I'd even lined the closet floor with water-absorbent mats. She sputtered something about excess moisture, but didn't have a direct code reference. Then she retreated, promising to look into compliance. Harriet later told me Karen appeared flustered, as though not sure how to handle my workaround. Sure enough, a few days later, an email from the HOA arrived, reading, "Attention residents, proposed amendment to storage rules." The text proposed restricting the use of storage closets to non-perishable, non-living items, citing concerns about pests, humidity, and potential building damage. The email stated they'd vote on this amendment at the upcoming HOA board meeting. Harriet immediately recognized it as Karen's handiwork. She's trying to shut down your greenhouse by making new rules. I wasn't surprised. If Karen couldn't penalize me for hallway plants, she'd try rewriting the guidelines to forbid plant cultivation in the closet. I prepared a defense, compiling photos showing how well-maintained the area was, with no sign of mold, pests, or water damage. I also got a statement from Carla, the property manager, who'd seen my setup and had no objections as long as I followed safety protocols. Harriet helped me gather a few neighbors who admired my miniature plant haven. They agreed to speak in support if needed. The day of the board meeting arrived. I walked into the building's community room with Harriet and a small group, determined to argue that my greenhouse caused no harm. The usual board members were there, including Ms. Delgado and Karen. The latter had a smug expression, as if expecting to steamroll the amendment. Ms. Delgado introduced the item, letting Karen speak first. Karen launched into a speech about uncontrolled humidity risking mold infiltration, fire hazards from excessive electrical usage, and the inappropriateness of hosting living flora in shared storage spaces. When it was my turn, I calmly displayed photos of my arrangement, the drip trays, the humidity sensor showing normal levels, the surge protector with safety certification. I cited that the closet had zero sign of mold or pests. I also read Carla's note confirming that my usage was within guidelines. Harriet and two neighbors chimed in that the closet's air smelled fresh, not damp, and no water was pooling. Ms. Delgado seemed swayed, noting the thoroughness of my setup. Another board member, Mr. Chan, said, "This occupant is paying rent for that storage portion. If there's no real hazard, I see no reason for a new rule." Karen bristled. She tried raising slippery slope concerns. Today it's plants. Tomorrow someone puts a fish tank or a hamster farm in there. The room snickered. Ms. Delgado retorted that we evaluate issues case by case, not ban everything outright. In the end, the board voted 3-2 against Karen's proposed amendment. My mini greenhouse would remain permissible. Karen's face was stormy as she realized her attempt had failed. With the board's official blessing, I fully embraced my mini greenhouse project, refining it further. I introduced a few new species, African violets, spider plants, even a small dwarf banana plant for fun. Soon, the little closet was brimming with lush greenery, the shelves a riot of shapes and textures. It became my sanctuary. Each evening after work, I'd slip inside, close the door, and breathe in the gentle humidity while adjusting the lights and spritzing leaves. Word spread among neighbors about my secret garden. Some asked if they could peek. I welcomed them, provided they stepped carefully around the cords. Harriet started jokingly calling it the Maplewood Tropical House, comparing the effect to a miniature botanical garden. A few folks even left small potted plants of their own with me, requesting I nurse them to health. I was happy to help, though I made sure not to clutter the closet beyond reason. It was a labor of love, and a subtle testament to the fact that the building's strictness could be circumvented with creativity and compliance with the letter of the law. Karen, though silent for a time, occasionally hovered near the storage room door, trying to catch me in some violation. She never found anything. My daily log showed stable humidity, no leaks, no pest infestations. The building staff verified the temperature was normal. Ms. Delgado's check-ins only confirmed my diligence. Thwarted, Karen could do nothing but glower, her grand plan to remove all plants from common areas backfiring. Instead of just 2 potted plants in the hall, I now had dozens thriving in the building, just behind that closet door. About a month later, an interesting development occurred. A local lifestyle blogger who specialized in unique home spaces heard rumors of my indoor greenhouse closet from a friend who lived in the building. She reached out, asking if she could feature it in a short piece about creative gardening solutions for apartment dwellers. I was flattered, but also cautious. Would shining a public spotlight on my greenhouse stir fresh trouble with Karen? Harriet urged me to go for it, pointing out that an upbeat blog post might help overshadow any negative spin Karen tried. So I agreed. The blogger visited one weekend, snapping photos of the lush foliage, the grow lights, the humidity setup. She interviewed me about how the project started because I had been forced to remove plants from the hallway. I spoke diplomatically, not naming Karen outright, but referencing HOA rules that prohibited corridor decor. The blogger found the story amusing, from forced compliance to creative triumph. When the blog post went live, it generated a small flurry of local interest. Friends and acquaintances texted me about seeing my closet jungle. Even a couple folks from other condo buildings asked for advice on replicating it. Harriet said a neighbor approached her, praising me for turning a negative into a positive. Meanwhile, Ms. Delgado told me the board was generally pleased that Maplewood was getting a bit of wholesome publicity. Only Karen was notably silent, presumably annoyed that the blog post singled out the HOA's rule that ironically led me to such an innovative solution. At the next monthly meeting, Ms. Though Karen remained subdued publicly, Harriet suspected she was plotting behind the scenes. Indeed, I soon discovered smaller acts of sabotage. For instance, I found the storage room door left ajar once, the latch undone, letting in a draft that lowered humidity drastically. Another time, the overhead corridor circuit breaker was switched off, cutting power to my grow lights for half a day. Harriet believed Karen was behind these petty inconveniences, though we had no proof. I responded by installing a small battery backup for the lights and a discreet lock on the inside of the door. Carla approved the lock since no one else had claimed the closet space. Furthermore, Karen began posting cryptic flyers about building safety and mold prevention, insinuating that any area with high humidity could risk harmful spores. She never named my greenhouse, but the subtext was clear. Ms. Delgado repeated that official inspections found no mold presence, so the flyer was likely just fear-mongering. Frustrated, I documented each incident: door left open, power mysteriously turned off, and shared them with Harriet. She suggested we quietly keep records in case it escalated. Karen's furious you outsmarted her, Harriet said. She might be trying to sabotage your project, so the board has cause to shut it down. We resolved to stay vigilant. Meanwhile, my tropical oasis continued to flourish, the leaves shimmering under bright LED lights, unaffected by Karen's petty maneuvers. Late one afternoon, Carla informed me the HOA planned a surprise walkthrough of the storage areas to ensure no code violations. Typically, these inspections were announced in advance, but apparently someone requested a more spontaneous check. Harriet speculated that someone was Karen, hoping to catch me off guard. I nodded, unconcerned. My greenhouse was tidy, no standing water, extension cords were secured. Let them see it in all its glory. On inspection day, Ms. Delgado, Carla, and 2 other board members arrived at the storage room door. Karen accompanied them, eyes gleaming with anticipation. I unlocked the door, stepped back, and let them inside. They blinked at the lush interior. Shelves stacked with healthy philodendrons, ferns, and tropical blossoms greeted them, lit by a gentle pinkish glow. A faint hush fell over the group as they took in the meticulously organized space. Plastic sheeting on the floor, a moisture meter, a small fan distributing air, not a drop of water on the floor. Karen tried pointing out potential mold risk, leaning in to sniff the corners. But Ms. Delgado checked the hygrometer reading, hovering around 60% humidity, not extreme. Another board member touched the walls, found them dry. Carla admired how I'd carefully draped plastic to protect surfaces from mist. The entire environment looked professionally managed. Karen scowled. This is quite an unusual use of storage. Are we sure it's safe for the building's infrastructure? Ms. Delgado shrugged. Everything appears contained. The occupant is renting the space and abiding by safety guidelines. I see no fault. Carla added that no building rules explicitly forbid horticulture in a rented closet. Karen, cornered, had no further argument. The group departed, Harriet and I exchanging a triumphant glance. A few days later, an official HOA email circulated. Subject: Community update and kudos. We recently completed a routine inspection of storage areas. We found a creative horticultural setup in one occupant's rented closet. We appreciate the occupant's meticulous safety precautions and respect for building guidelines. Maplewood Towers encourages responsible, innovative uses of private rental spaces. Please remember that corridor decor remains restricted. However, personal projects within rented areas are permissible if they meet safety standards. The message ended by thanking me, by name, for demonstrating how to maintain a specialized environment responsibly. Harriet was overjoyed. They publicly praised you. That must gall Karen. Indeed, Karen's name was nowhere to be seen, but everyone recognized the subtext. My greenhouse was validated as safe and permissible, effectively squashing Karen's repeated attempts to brand it a hazard. That same evening, Harriet saw Karen in the lobby, overhearing her muttering about how the building sets a dangerous precedent letting people store random living things in closets. Another neighbor retorted, "It's better than having them clutter the hallway, right?" Karen glared. The building was siding with me. She'd lost every official battle. I was abiding by the rules, yet I'd turned her corridor ban into a flamboyant horticultural statement that garnered respect from neighbors and the HOA board alike. With that victory in hand, I felt a sense of relief. My greenhouse would remain safe from her sabotage. More neighbors asked for gardening tips. Even the building's caretaker occasionally popped by to admire the plants, remarking how the closet's stale air used to smell musty, but now carried a fresh, earthy scent. It was a small but meaningful triumph in the ongoing war over personal freedom versus petty HOA authoritarianism. As the weeks passed, Karen's hostility cooled somewhat. She maintained her usual routine of prowling the halls, notepad at the ready, but she no longer targeted me specifically. Harriet relayed that at a board meeting, Ms. Delgado publicly thanked me for turning an unoccupied space into something beneficial to the building's spirit. Karen evidently offered no protest. Then, one afternoon, a faintly startling event occurred. Karen knocked on my condo door. My heart jumped. When I answered, she stood stiffly, carrying a small succulent in a plastic pot. She cleared her throat. I was gifted this succulent, but I have no place for it at home. Since you're the building's plant expert, I wondered if you'd keep it in your greenhouse. I blinked, uncertain if this was a trick. Her posture read tension, as if she hated asking but saw no alternative. After a moment, I nodded. Sure, I can place it on a shelf in the closet if you'd like. Succulents don't require high humidity, though. She offered a ghost of a smile, handing it over. I realized that. But maybe it can stay near the door, away from the humidifier. Just keep an eye on it. Harriet, watching from her door, looked astonished. After Karen left, I placed the succulent on a mid-level shelf in the greenhouse, adjusting the light. Harriet whispered, "What was that about?" I shrugged. Maybe she's trying to make peace, or is curious how plants thrive in that environment. It seemed improbable, but the gesture felt like a small olive branch. I resolved to care for the succulent, though I remained wary, unsure if this signaled genuine respect or hidden motives. Nonetheless, it underscored a shift. My horticultural project had one official acceptance, leaving Karen with no recourse but to adapt. Even if she disliked it, she had to coexist with my unstoppable greenery. Over time, my greenhouse became a cherished quirk of Maplewood Towers' identity. Harriet joked that new residents were told about the fifth-floor tropical closet, a testament to creativity triumphing over petty regulation. Some approached me for tips on houseplants inside a condo. I soon had more caretaker tasks than I intended. Coaxing a neighbor's ailing fern back to life, diagnosing a spider mite infestation in another's orchid. Every so often, Harriet or a friend would drop by with a camera, marveling at the transformation of that once drab closet into a verdant wonderland. I kept adding small details, a decorative poster of rainforest vistas, a low-volume water fountain for ambience. The gentle trickle turned the space into a tranquil nook. I'd find myself spending 15 or 20 minutes there daily, relishing the calm. Despite living in a strict HOA building, I'd carved out a sanctuary of wild growth. And ironically, the entire impetus for this project was Karen's ban on hallway plants. Without her meddling, I might never have discovered the closet's potential. The more I thought about it, the more it amused me. Her attempt to stifle my small potted corner led to me building a bigger, more elaborate horticultural domain, one that the HOA itself praised. Harriet called it the ultimate turning lemons into lemonade scenario. Karen, though still the building's compliance hawk, increasingly found her authority questioned. Residents realized that if a rule is unreasonable, creativity might circumvent it. Ms. Delgado told me that the board saw fewer petty complaints about corridor decor since people recognized how I'd turned a forced removal into something positive. A quiet ripple of empowerment spread among neighbors. Seasons changed, but my indoor garden stayed evergreen. The tropical climate within the closet let me grow species ordinarily impossible in a typical condo. My once lonely plants thrived among a broad variety, forming a mini forest. Harriet and I occasionally joked about adding a parrot or two, though that would definitely cross a line. We stuck to plants only. Karen never openly admitted defeat. Yet occasionally, I noticed her passing by, glancing at the closet door. She no longer tried to sabotage the power or sabotage the door's latch. The succulent she gave me even sprouted a tiny flower, which I pruned neatly, presenting to her in the hallway one day. She accepted it stiffly, a flicker of something like gratitude on her face. Perhaps, in a small way, we'd found an uneasy truce. Bloom by bloom, Maplewood Towers recognized that a uniform corridor can also mean allowing residents to express themselves in alternative ways. My greenhouse served as a subtle reminder that not every HOA rule must stifle creativity. When neighbors asked for new ideas, Harriet pointed them to me. Talk to the greenhouse caretaker. She knows how to keep the peace while still going green. So life continued. I paid my monthly rent for that closet corner, nurtured my beloved plants, and walked the corridors with less tension, no longer worrying about hidden notes from Karen. My greenhouse became a testament to the synergy of compliance and ingenuity. In the end, the forced removal from the hallway proved a blessing in disguise, leading me to create something far more spectacular behind closed doors. Every time I unlocked the closet to tend my mini rainforest, I'd recall how Karen's ban ironically fueled my biggest horticultural achievement. I'd smile at the irony. Standing amidst the glowing leaves and quiet hum of the humidifier, I felt a gentle sense of triumph. Maplewood Towers might never know how close they came to losing any sign of greenery outside private units. Instead, they gained an unexpected tropical refuge hidden inside a simple storage closet, all thanks to Karen, the neighbor who demanded I remove houseplants from the hall, thereby inspiring me to cultivate an entire jungle in her backyard, so to speak.